One of the most important things while working on electronic music is getting the relationship between your kick and your bass perfect. I'm going to show you some tips and tricks that I use on how to do this in my tracks. Stay tuned. Hello everyone, and welcome to Distinct Mastering. My name is Freddie. I'm a mastering engineer, producer, DJ, and president of Sleeping Giant Music. For over 2 decades, I've helped artists grow their careers, and now I'm here to help you with your music production skills. If you like my content, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and the bell notification will keep you up to date. Now let's chat about ways you can marry the relationship between your kick and your bass. Okay, let's discuss some of the major things that make up the relationship between the kick and the bass. First of all, the 4 things you can use to spot problems with your kick and your bass are very, very common tricks. And the first one is going to be called layer masking. Layer masking is when you have 2 frequencies that are basically occupying the same space, and that can be causing some phase cancellation or just essential buildup. And that's not good. You typically want to try to say, for example, if you have a low thumpy kick, you're going to want to try a little bit of a higher mid-range bass, and vice versa. If you have a really subby bass, probably want a kick drum that occupies a different space. Now you can use EQ tricks like carving, or you can even use, if you're an avid user of FabFilter Pro Q3 like me, you can check out the sidechain feature. I recently did a video on the FabFilter Pro Q3 and why it's one of my favorite EQs. I'll leave you a link up above so you can check that out. Now, another way you can prevent layer masking is you can use some sidechain techniques, or another great plugin that I love to use is the Waves Factory Track Spacer. And I already have a video on that as well, so I'll leave you a link to that up above. So I've got a track open here, and it's a new track of mine I haven't quite released yet. One of the things that I'm going to show you, though, is the sidechain feature. So you can see here that I went ahead and boosted a little here at 211 and cut a little of the top out. Interestingly enough, here in the bass line, we've got a Pro Q3 here as well, and there's a little bit of a cut there and a boost there, which is interesting. But you can see that I have the kick sidechained here, and like I said, I made a video on this, so go check out the FabFilter Pro Q3. And as I play this, you can see the kick back there in red. And you see how I see there's a little bit of a fundamental here at the 40 hertz with that kick drum. So I went ahead and carved some out of the bass. Not a ton, just, 4, almost 5 dB. I guess whatever I felt like that sounded good. If I turn that off, it just gives a little more thump to the kick. And then if you notice, there's not a lot going on right here with the kick drum, so I boosted a little there. Maybe I wanted a little more of that bite out of that bass line. And if you conversely look back over here, I can pull this up as well if you'd like to see the bass. So right where the bass line is, it does have some frequencies there, but I did bring a little punch out here in the kick. Now, you could potentially carve a little here if you'd like. And really, the possibilities are kind of endless, but the point is, you don't want any masking going on. You don't want the kick drum and the bass to be occupying the same frequencies. And if they are similar, you can try to carve some space in each one of them. With the sidechain feature here in FabFilter Pro Q3, it makes it really easy to see the relationship between 2 sources. So I highly suggest you check that out. Now, another way that you can eliminate some masking is by actually using sidechain. And as you can see, I've got a sidechain trigger track up here. I have a sidechain here with a Pro MB, which I'm only sidechaining 200 hertz and down. And as you can see, I have it set to external. So every time that the sidechain trigger hits, I'm getting a little compression ducking going on at a max of 6 dB with a fast attack and a fast release, only 200 hertz and below. So if I turn this off, it doesn't give the transient for the kick punching through. So what this does is it ducks the bass a little bit, and it allows for the kick transient to hit harder. And that leads me to the next thing about the transients. I'll get that there in a second, but let me go ahead and play this for you. So you can hear the kick drum is clicking. And the beautiful thing about that is it just ducks the bass a little bit, lets the kick transient through, and boom. And that leads me to the next thing, which is transients. Another thing you can try to do is control the transients of the relationship, maybe the kick and the bass, or even add a transient. If you notice here, I have a kick click track, and all this is a tiny little hi-hat that I've chopped off. And you might not realize that that's there, but when I take it away, it's going to be very apparent. So this is without, and then you see right there, just boom. So I added my own transient to my kick drum. And I also have a top kick here, which hasn't, that's over here, but this just gives it some variation and some changes. And really what I'm doing is by adding that transient, that little click, I'm letting that kick drum cut through my mix. It's just boom. And as the side chain is coming down and ducking the bass, the kick and the click are hitting at the same time, and you just got this nice top end little thing that's piercing through the mix. So those are some of the tricks that I have to help with masking and to really mix and dial in the relationship between my kick and my bass. Another thing you can do to monitor your kick and your bass, if you're using MIDI, I suggest you bounce to audio. As you can see, I'm already using audio, and you can kind of monitor the transient information. As you can see here, the kick drum transient doesn't start till a little later in this sound, and that leaves all the more room for my click to come in. You could even play with the click coming in, say, a little earlier and see what that sounds like. It could be good, it could be bad. There's no rules to this. Now, if you were to take a look at the bass line and see how this is playing along with it, this will give you an example to see how the transient information is here as well. And so if I bring the bass line up here and we take a look at what's going on, I can actually see the transient information. So if I had a sharp transient coming in at the same time as the kick drum, that would not be ideal because I have a very sharp peak here and a very sharp peak here. And one of the things you could use is maybe a fade. Just draw in some automation or a fade. You could just put in a little fade if there's a big transient there and shape the sound yourself manually. Or you could potentially use a Transient Designer. I have a video on the UAD SPL Transient Designer. I'll leave you a link up above. And that could either, put a small transient fade in on the initial attack of, say, your bass or your kick or any other sound that you want. And that will help with the relationship of things kind of cutting through the mix and just marrying the balance between the two of them. You want the kick to be slamming in dance music, you want the bass to be present, and you want everything working together. But if there's too much buildup in one frequency or they're just not working together, they're going to clash and it's going to just sound messy. And the goal is to make it sound tight, punchy, have it hit hard. You want the subs to be hitting your chest and just knocking, so you've got to do some things to really get your whole marriage and the relationship between the kick and the bass sitting well together. Last but not least, I have a cool plugin. I did a video on this recently called Kick Tweak, and it's a great plugin. I'm not a big fan of the one knob plugins, but I've fallen in love with this plugin. I think that it's great for what it is. I think it's great for what it is, and it just really helps. Let me go ahead and loop this. Now there's the kick. Obviously it's low without it because it does bring up a lot of volume. There you can hear it. But it just gives it a little more bite, a little more presence. So I recommend you check that out. Now, one last thing that I want to mention before we get off this video is when you're using synths and stuff to do your bass lines, especially in the analog world, if you're tracking in analog's hardware like I do sometimes, you're not going to always get the same sound when you bounce in, because that's how analog synths work. And sometimes in the DAW, when you convert MIDI to audio, say if you're using a Serum or a VST of some sort, sometimes the sounds are going to be a little different, and that's kind of replicating analog synths. It's not going to be always the same. So you might want to be a little attentive to your audio. If you do a whole thing and bounce it to audio, you might like a piece of it, and maybe you loop that section instead of leave the whole thing. These are just some tips that I suggest you check out, because that's kind of a pro tip. A lot of people might not realize that it could vary a little bit. That's just how these things operate. It's just like in the analog domain, it's not going to be perfect every time you do a bounce. It's going to be slightly different every time. And you can always do a null test to verify if you're really curious. So hopefully these tips give you some ideas to help with your kick and your bass relationship. If you have any questions, shoot me a comment down below. And that's an overview of how you can get the relationship between your kick and the bass to sit perfectly together. If you have any questions, shoot me a comment down below. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and the bell notification will keep you up to date. Once again, my name is Freddie from Distinct Mastering, and have a great day.